All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Appreciate you taking the time to join us here today. I'm Michael Stacy, and I am the managing editor here at Missouri Business Alert. For those of you who are new to Missouri Business Alert, we are a digital publication based out of the School of Journalism here at the University of Missouri, and we provide top business news from across the state. We also host events like this one designed to help inform, connect, and entertain people all across the state. If you're interested in following our journalists' work, a great way to do that is to subscribe to our free email newsletter. It's packed every day with the top business news from across Missouri, and you can subscribe at missouribusinessalert.com/subscribe. Again, that is missouribusinessalert.com/subscribe. One more just quick housekeeping item. We want everyone who's watching live today to be able to join in the conversation. And we will make some time later in the hour for audience questions. So please ask away if you have questions, and we will try and get to them a little later. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can use the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen, or if you're tuned in on Facebook, you can also use the comments section to ask questions. And now, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce Bob Kendrick, who is the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City. Anniversary this month. I can't think of a better person to chat with about all that than Bob. He has served as president of the Negro Leagues Museum since March 2011. He started as a volunteer at the museum early in the 1990s and has worked there in a variety of roles ever since. In his time as president, Bob has helped stabilize the museum financially, and he's also helped elevate its profile nationally and globally. He is to a man, a tireless ambassador for the museum, for the Negro Leagues, and for the game of baseball. And we are thrilled to have him with us today. Bob, welcome.
Michael, man, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you guys for inviting me. And hello, everyone.
So it feels like an hour is so little time for as much as I want to get to here today, and the number of great stories I know you have, Bob. But I'm hopeful that we can sort of tackle a few broad topics. One, we are Missouri Business Alert, so hoping we can talk a little bit of business, obviously talk a little baseball, and then also get to what the Negro Leagues means to the push for civil rights and the push for social justice. But to begin with, we'll start with a number, and that is 101. I know that this month marks the 101st anniversary of the founding of the Negro Leagues. If my math's correct, it's been 101 years and 11 days since February 13th, 1920. And I'm curious just kind of what's going on with the museum and what special programming you have around the anniversary.
You know, Michael, we were very excited on the actual 101st anniversary of the birth of the Negro Leagues, formed right here in Kansas City in 1920. It was on that historic date that Rube Foster led a contingent of 8 independent Black baseball team owners into Kansas City, and they met at the Paseo YMCA, just right around the corner from where the museum currently operates. As a matter of fact, folks, we actually own that historic landmark. We've been restoring it and going to convert it into an education and research center in memory of the late, great Buck O'Neill. So in essence, we're going full circle right back to the very building that gave birth to the story that we're now charged with preserving. But on February 13th of this year, we announced our plans for Negro Leagues 101. And so, yes, it is a celebration of the 101st anniversary, but it's also a very sweeping national educational initiative that is essentially an introduction to the Negro Leagues. But this introduction to the Negro Leagues will essentially be geared to meet all levels of learners, from elementary, middle, high school, but we're also developing a college level 101 course. And I tell people all the time, those 101 courses, Michael, were the only ones I passed in college. When we got to the 300 and 400 level, man, I was in trouble. And so I needed those 101 courses, no prerequisite, no nothing. They just helped me boost my grade point average. I learned a little bit. And we hope that we can take that same spirit of those 101 level classes and create this introduction to give people an opportunity number one, to have access to this story. Because I really don't believe that there was ever a time that people didn't want to know about the Negro Leagues. They just had no way to know about the Negro Leagues. It's not documented in the pages of American history books. So, really, countless generations of us have gone through our own formal educations without knowing one of the most significant chapters, not in baseball history, but in American history. And that's the rich, compelling, powerful, inspirational story of the Negro Leagues. So we are addressing that. And the overarching goal is to provide greater access to this history, which we think has tremendously rich educational value. But for our young people, the inspirational value is just as significant. So now we're excited about that. There will be a number of initiatives that will be launched over the course of the year, but hopefully leading by the fall, that there will actually be a collegiate level course that we will be able to offer to colleges and universities across the country, where we can do this in a virtual capacity to bring Negro Leagues into the classroom.
Wow, that's great. You mentioned as we were getting ready here, another recent going on there, which was the acquisition of some artifacts and kind of building out the collection there. What are some of the latest things that kind of have you excited on that front?
Well, on February 13th, we also announced three major additions to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum's collection. And let me preface this by saying, we have almost, Michael, become our own worst enemy. The more we popularize the story, y'all, we're driving up the price of these rare artifacts that makes it difficult for us to go compete in the marketplace to bring them home. But that's the byproduct of what we do. And if that is what it requires, then so be it, because we do want people to know about the story. And I would say that 95% of the items that are on display here at the museum, they were either donated by the players or by the players' families. And so we've been fortunate along those regards. Over the last decade or so, we've started to try and compete. We have to be very stealth-like at what we go after. But on Saturday, February 13th, we announced that the late great actress director, Penny Marshall, bequeathed us her entire Negro Leagues collection. Now, I'll be honest, I did not know that Penny was such an avid Negro Leagues collector. And it was only after she passed away and some time later that her estate notified us that Miss Marshall had left her collection to the museum and posed the question, would you all like to have it? Well, naturally, we said yes. It didn't even matter what was in it. Penny Marshall thought enough about the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum to leave us whatever she had, and that was significant in its own right. But as it turned out, there are some really unique pieces in that collection, particularly as it relates to the late great Goose Tatum, Reese Goose Tatum, who perhaps was this country's first great two-way star. Goose Tatum, you may remember that name as a great basketball player. He starred for the Harlem Globetrotters. Of course, Goose Tatum is also enshrined in the Basketball Hall of Fame. But Goose Tatum was a great baseball player, primarily for the Indianapolis Clowns. And so there are some wonderful additions that was part of her collection that looks at the life and times of the great Goose Tatum, and some other items, particularly some scorecards and vintage magazines and those kinds of things that are going to make wonderful additions to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. We also acquired a collection known as the J. Cardwell Collection. And within that collection is the financial journal of the great Rube Foster. And this journal is significant because it documents every business transaction that took place from 1920, when the leagues were formed, through 1925. And it is all meticulously documented. And what that does, we believe, is the holy grail of Negro Leagues memorabilia. Because I know most people look at jerseys and balls, bats and gloves and those kinds of things. But that financial journal gives us an opportunity to tout the significant business aspect of Black baseball. A lot of people don't understand the fact that the Negro Leagues were the third largest Black owned business in this country. It only trailed Black owned insurance companies, Michael, who would emerge and eventually insure me more than the 10 or 15 cents that the white insurance companies would insure me. During that era of American segregation, the white insurance companies would essentially insure me enough to bury me. Well, black-owned insurance companies came about and not only insured my livelihood, but insured my stock, my crop, my home, and as a result made millions of dollars. Next was Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker would become this country's first self-made businesswoman millionaire of any skin color. And of course, she did it during Black hair. Madam C.J. had schools of cosmetology in every major urban center in this country and became the first woman to earn it $1 million with a business structure. Next was Negro Leagues Baseball. And if the late, great Buck O'Neill was here, he'd tell you all you needed was a bus, 2 sets of uniforms, and you'd have 20 of the greatest athletes who ever lived. They could play. But when we look at the hierarchy of those other businesses, the Negro Leagues actually spawned more Black enterprise. It's just like it is today, where you create, you got a baseball team, you move stadium downtown, and all of a sudden you see all the infrastructure in and around that stadium start to grow. It was the exact same way with the Negro Leagues. They were bringing those segregated, mandated Black-owned businesses a built-in clientele. So case in point, here at historic 18th and Vine, where the museum operates, the stadium, y'all, was at 22nd in Brooklyn, just a few blocks up and over from where the museum operates. And opening day here, there would be a marching band that led people from 18th and Vine to 22nd in Brooklyn. The stadium held about 17,000 fans. When the Monarchs played, 17,000 plus, standing room only. And then they would all come back and do business with all of these segregated, mandated Black-owned businesses. So as a result, those businesses were flourishing. Truth of the matter is, if there was a bittersweet aspect to the overall story of the Negro Leagues, it lies in the fact that you can directly parallel the rise and fall of the Negro Leagues with the rise and fall of Black economy in this country. And to a great extent, Michael, Black economy never recovered from losing the Negro Leagues. So this journal gives us an opportunity to bring that economic story to the forefront, because it was such a great Black business that it was really a catalyst for other Black businesses.
Absolutely. I want to dig in a little more on the idea of sort of the founders of the Negro Leagues as entrepreneurs. And I know that they had a lot of different tactics and strategies that were sort of unprecedented at the time. Mm-hmm. Rube Foster among them. But I'm curious what some of the innovations hatched by the early Negro Leagues innovators that we now take for granted kind of stick out to you.
Yeah, no, and I think it's one of those eye openers when folks come here to the museum is the innovations that came out of the Negro Leagues. And Rube Foster was a master innovator. When we talk about someone, Rube Foster, I think, Michael, you can make a legitimate claim, is the most significant individual in baseball history. Because Rube Foster not only did it as an executive, Rube Foster was a great manager. Rube Foster had been a great player. Rube Foster could go in the Hall of Fame for really every aspect as a player, manager, and executive. And Rube Foster is actually credited with having invented what we now know to be the screwball. Back then, it was called a fadeaway. And Rube perfected this pitch. So much so that the great Major League manager, John McGraw, would sneak Rube Foster into his camp so that Rube Foster could teach Christy Mathewson how to throw the screwball. Christy Mathewson threw that pitch all the way into the National Baseball Hall of Fame that he learned from Rube Foster. But Foster would also find his ball players. If they were tagged out standing up, you were supposed to slide. He would draw a circle down the first base line and a circle down the third base line. And if every one of his players couldn't drop a bunt inside that circle, he would find them. He was adamant about the style of play that would become signature Negro Leagues baseball. Fast, aggressive, daring. They bunt their way on, they steal second, they steal third, And folks, if you weren't too smart, they were stealing home. And so, but also innovations like the shin guards, batting helmets, these things all come out of the Negro Leagues. And most notably, night baseball. Yeah, the Negro Leagues were playing night games 5 years before they ever played a night game in the major leagues. Now, be mindful that our history book is going to tell us that the first professional night baseball game, 1935, Crossley Field, Cincinnati, Ohio, Cincinnati Reds versus the Philadelphia Phillies. Well, the history book is wrong. The first professional night baseball game, 1930, and it featured our very own Kansas City Monarchs. J.L. Wilkinson, who owned the Monarchs, literally mortgaged everything he had to pioneer night baseball, portable generated light towers. So not only could they play a night game here in Kansas City, they could load them up on the truck and play a night game virtually anywhere. And truth of the matter is, Michael, Wilkie wasn't doing this to be innovative. He was doing it for survival. You see, back then, the Negro Leagues were primarily relegated to playing on Sundays. The major leagues didn't play on Sundays, so the Negro Leagues would rent their ballpark, play that Sunday doubleheader. Well, we left church, going straight to the ballpark, dressed to the nines, as they would say, looking good. And so he was looking for a way to get the working class fan into the ballpark. Night baseball became the answer. Night baseball became bigger than Sunday games. Folks, Sunday games were so popular that black churches would move their service time up an hour. Now, if you know anything about the black church, you don't mess with service time. 11 o'clock Sunday go to meeting. But when the Monarchs were home, service started at 10 o'clock and everybody left going to that Sunday doubleheader. And night baseball was even bigger than that. And so these kinds of innovations are awakenings for a lot of people when they come here because the Negro Leagues never simply were given credit for any of it.
Another, I would say, legacy of the Negro Leagues is the essence of baseball as a global game. And I know if you look down a roster today, you see people from all across the world. But once upon a time, it was really black baseball that was pioneering, bringing the game to the globe. I wonder if you can kind of reflect on the legacy in terms of spreading the game across the globe.
Yeah, no, it's another eye opener for our visitors because the game is, in essence, a global game because of the Negro Leagues. You see, the Negro Leaguers were heralded barnstormers. And if you're hearing that term for the first time, in this case, in this baseball world, it just meant that they were taking baseball to towns and places that had never seen professional baseball. So the Negro Leagues, Michael, would take baseball into Canada. They were oftentimes the first Americans to play in many Spanish speaking countries. Believe it or not, folks, it was a touring team of Negro Leaguers that would introduce professional baseball to the Japanese going all the way back to 1927. Now, that is well before Babe Ruth and his All Stars visit Japan. Now, they've been commonly credited with having taken professional baseball to the Japanese, but it's not true. It was actually a team called the Philadelphia Royal Giants who would go to Japan in 1927, play a 24 game exhibition series. They go 23-0-1 on the tour. The tour was so successful that several years later, Babe Ruth and his All Stars would get invited over. And I always preface that with my visitors because, as you mentioned, as we look at the game today in its global capacity, there are so many ethnicities that make up a major league roster on any given day. At the heart of it were the Negro Leagues. They help make the game the global game that it is. And quite frankly, y'all, the Negro Leagues didn't care what color you were. All they cared was, can you play? And if you can play, you can play. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, didn't care about race, nor did the Negro Leagues care about man or woman. And I'm curious about the role of women in the Negro Leagues. They seem to have been way ahead of their time in terms of welcoming women into the fold.
Oh, no question.
Who were the standouts, and what do you think it was about the leagues that made them so receptive to sort of challenging those norms of the time?
And I've often kind of wondered about that because what I admire so much about this story and the players who helped make this story is that they would not succumb. They were not going to treat others the way that they had been treated. So they opened their doors up to anyone who could play, including women. And there were three pioneering women who did call the Negro Leagues home in the 1950s: Toni Stone, Connie Morgan, and Mamie Peanut Johnson, women who competed with and against the men in the 1950s. Toni Stone would become the first female of professional baseball. And she took the roster place of someone you may have heard his name before, the late, great Henry Aaron. Yeah, the Boston Braves had signed Henry Aaron away from the Indianapolis Clowns right after the 1952 season. In 53, the Clowns hired Toni Stone. And Toni would then become the first woman to play professionally with and against the men. And then Mamie Peanut Johnson would follow her, a 5'3" pitcher with a strong right arm. And then Connie Morgan, who came out of the Philadelphia area, would be next. All three were tremendously talented athletes. Now, was there a marketing twist to this? Of course it was. The Negro Leagues, Michael, had started to lose its fan base to the major leagues. As this pipeline of great Black talent were now kind of making this exodus out of the Negro Leagues into Major League Baseball, Black fans had a natural curiosity to want to see how their great Black stars were going to fare now that they finally had this opportunity. And so the Indianapolis Clowns would hire Toni Stone, hoping that they could generate a female base of clientele. And that's exactly what happened. But it doesn't diminish the athletic ability of these three women. There were also female leaders in the Negro Leagues, executives, owners, most notably Effa Manley. Effa Manley and her husband Abe owned the Newark Eagles, but it was Mrs. Manley who ran the day-to-day operations of that baseball team. Folks, she knew the business of baseball as well as any man. Great talent play for her. My dear friend, the late great Monty Irvin, Larry Doby, Leon Day, Willie Wells, all in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. The late great Don Newcombe should be in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. All played for Effa Manley's Newark Eagles. Mrs. Manley is the first woman to be nominated and inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame at Cooperstown. So again, it strikes me that here's a league born out of segregation that would become the driving force for social change in this country. A league born out of exclusion would become perhaps its most inclusive entity. Again, they didn't care what color you were, and they didn't care what gender you were. Can you play? Do you have something to offer? Well, that's the way it is supposed to be.
Absolutely. I want to shift gears a little bit to more recent history, and specifically last year, which was the 100th anniversary of the museum, or rather of the leagues. And I know you all had a lot planned there at the museum, and then came the pandemic and shutdowns in March. This event is, the title is about resilience, and I'm curious how you and your team there at the museum have had to show resilience and how you've sort of adjusted since the onset of the pandemic.
Hey man, it was crazy. It was literally one of the wackiest years I can remember. You're right. We had put together what we thought was a tremendous game plan to recognize the 100th anniversary of the birth of the Negro Leagues, which we thought was one of the most significant milestones, again, not in baseball history, but in American history. And so we were putting together plans for a year-long 100th anniversary celebration. As a matter of fact, on February 13th of last year, Michael, we went right back into the Paseo YMCA. And I had an all-star roster of distinguished guests there with me to help commemorate this milestone. So we've got the commissioner of Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, Xavier James, the chief operating officer of Major League Baseball's Players Association, the honorable mayor of Kansas City, Quentin Lucas. We've got my dear friend, 8-time Gold Glove winner, Royal Hall of Famer Frank White there, and of course now Jackson County executive. We've got John Sherman, who is the owner of the Kansas City Royals, and Mike Kehoe, the lieutenant governor of the great state of Missouri, all gathered with me at the Paseo YMCA on that milestone anniversary date. We roll out our plans. Major League Baseball and Major League Baseball's Players Association announced a joint $1 million contribution to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Man, we are off and running. And then, folks, less than 30 days later, everything came to a screeching halt. Just like that. Yeah, I didn't know anything about no doggone coronavirus. Hell, I still don't know much about a coronavirus, but I know it caused a lot of havoc. And so many of the group gathering events we had to postpone or just outright cancel. And so you talk about resiliency, and resiliency is really the hallmark of what this story is all about. And I've said on many occasions, as a steward of this story, you know that you cannot wallow in self pity. Doing so would be doing a complete injustice to those who call the Negro Leagues home. You see, they never cried about the social adversity. They went out and did something about it. You won't let me play with you in the major leagues? Okay, I'll create my own league. So you know you cannot wallow. But man, I'd be lying to you if I told you that I wasn't doing a little bit of wallowing right after this ordeal all went down. We shut down March 14th. We had to close our operations down March 14th. And then finally on June 16th, we were able to reopen. And so, yeah, I was doing a little wallowing. And then at some point, you do realize that, okay, you can't just lay down. You got to get up and try to figure out, because story of the Negro Leagues is about making a way when there seemingly is no way. And so to use a very bad baseball analogy, coronavirus was that big, nasty right-hander that just threw one high and tight and knock you down. And you know you got to get back up, dust yourself off, get back in the batter's box, and figure out how you gonna hit this sucker. And that's exactly what we did. And so, out of necessity, we put together a campaign called Tip Your Cap to the Negro Leagues that just happened to go viral. Now, you don't set out to do a viral campaign, but what we were hoping to do was create a level of engagement that would kind of reignite our 100th anniversary celebration. And so I called my good friend Joe Posnanski, the great writer. Joe is my brother. We're not biological brothers, but we're as close as brothers. And I always vet my crazy ideas with Joe. And so I called Joe. I said, Joe, I got this idea to see if we can't do a virtual tip your cap to the Negro Leagues. And I'm waiting for him to tell me, Bob, this is crazy. We can't do this. And he didn't say that. He said, Bob, I think that's a great idea. And let me call my business partner, a guy named Dan McGinn. Dan, who is a tremendous communication strategist out of the DC area. We vetted it with Dan. And Dan thought it was a great idea. Well, on June 29th, we rolled out this campaign called Tip Your Cap to the Negro Leagues, folks, with 4 US presidents tipping their cap. President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton, President Carter, notable dignitaries like General Colin Powell, transcending athletes like Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson and Billie Jean King, the late great Henry Aaron, Bob Costas, Stephen Colbert, Conan O'Brien, a plethora of current and former major leaguers. And then fans started to get involved with this. And there were little leaguers taking team pictures, tipping their cap, saying, I see you. Because you see, in baseball, there's nothing more honorable that a ball player can do than just simply tipping their cap. It is the ultimate show of respect. And so to see little kids saying, I see you, and I appreciate what you did. And this thing just started to grow. But Michael, when we went literally into outer space and got a tip of the cap from astronaut Chris Cassidy, who was aboard the International Space Station, I knew then that we had done something pretty special. And if you're curious about the campaign, you can visit tippingyourcap.com and see some of the amazing people who saluted the Negro Leagues as part of our 100th anniversary celebration. But this created a level of engagement. It was on virtually every national broadcast arm, from the Today Show, Good Morning America, CBS Morning and Evening News, everywhere. People were celebrating this. And so that kind of got the momentum going for us again. When baseball returned on August 16th, we held our National Day of Recognition. And granted, there weren't fans in the stands, but to see all the ball clubs honoring the Negro Leagues. As a matter of fact, every team had, I don't know if you can see this with my screen. My screen may be causing problems.
Yeah.
They had this patch on their uniform. And it's the first time that all the clubs on one given day had honored the Negro Leagues. And so the level around that from an engagement standpoint was just stratospheric. And I tell people, it was a 17-hour day for me that day. I started running my mouth at 5 o'clock that morning on the Korean baseball channel with ESPN during the Korean games. And I stopped about 10 o'clock that night. And I was absolutely exhausted, but it was the most gratifying level of exhaustion I've ever experienced. And throughout the course of that day, I continually reflected on my friend Buck O'Neill, the great Buck O'Neill. When I met him in 1993, Michael, one of the first questions I asked him was, what motivated you to want to build a Negro Leagues Museum? And his answer was very succinct, but also very profound: so that we would be remembered. And man, on August 16th of last year, I'm sorry, they were being remembered in ways in which I don't even think Buck could have ever dreamt. And so the momentum now was really building. And then near the end of the year, we made the announcement that Congress had passed bipartisan legislation that would authorize the US Mint to create a commemorative coin in recognition of the 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues, and was signed into law by the president. So in 2022, the coin will be minted. And obviously it's very prestigious. It's difficult to get these. And they only issue two of these a year. And then you think about it, such a contentious presidential political year. So to get that bipartisan legislation, that was no small task, as I'm sure most of you can appreciate and understand. It was hard to get the Democrats and the Republicans to agree on anything. If one walked outside and said the sun is shining, the other was going to say, no, it ain't. That was just how contentious things were. But thanks to Representative Emmanuel Cleaver, Representative Steve Stivers out of Ohio, Senator Tim Kaine, and Senator Roy Blunt, who championed this effort, they were able to get this bipartisan legislation pushed through. And so when this coin is minted in 2022, if we're successful selling through, and this will be a series of three: a gold, silver, and something they call clad, which I guess is some kind of alloy metal. But guys, if we're able to sell through these coins, and I hope you all will buy them when they come out, we can raise some $6 million in support of this museum. So there is a significant revenue component associated with the release of these coins. And then in December, of course, Major League Baseball announced that it was long last recognizing the Negro Leagues for exactly what they were, a major league. So in the midst of a challenging time for everybody around the world, we were able to have one of the most successful years we've ever had. After I finally dusted myself off, you know.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, COVID threw us for a loop. Following shortly thereafter was the tragic death of George Floyd in late May, and the protests and activism that followed that. And I wonder how, if at all, your view of the museum and its mission and what it's trying to accomplish has changed in the aftermath of all those events.
And it's really interesting, Michael, because I don't think it really changed. When we built the museum, when we started this notion of building a Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in 1990, it was obviously with the mission of preserving, educating people about the rich history of Black baseball and its impact on the social advancement of America. But it was also with the understanding that this museum would be and is a civil rights museum. It is a social justice museum. Man, it's just seen through the lens of baseball. But more importantly, it is triumph over that adversity. And after the tragic murder of George Floyd, people really started to turn to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum for thought leadership. And I think they grasped that. And that was significant for us. And so what it has done now is it has actually expanded the museum as a resource. And so we are having these conversations that talk and speak to diversity, inclusion, equity, the importance of tolerance and respect. These are things that all stem from that tragic episode that we all sadly had to witness time and time and time again. But it did kind of get people more in tune to the fact that enough is enough. We now have to do something. And I'm proud that the museum can be part of bridging the racial gap in our country. And if we can use the winning spirit of the Negro Leagues to do that, that is really important. And it just heightens, I think, what this museum is all about. And I hope it adds even greater value to us as an institution.
Absolutely. You can't talk about the intersection of sports and civil rights without a mention of the great Jackie Robinson, who was advancing the cause, as a player for the Brooklyn Dodgers. I wonder if you see any lessons or any echoes of what Jackie did that athletes today who are embracing activism and making their voices heard. What lessons from Jackie can athletes today perhaps take?
There are a number. And sometimes, Michael, and I remember I asked Sharon Robinson, Jackie's daughter, I said, do you think your father really understood the magnitude of what he was about to embark on when he became the chosen one to break Major League Baseball's 6 decade long self imposed color barrier? And it's hard for me to fathom that he could have known going into this. I knew he knew that this was significant, but I don't know if he knew that he was literally going to be carrying 21 million Black folks on his back when he walked across those lines. Because, guys, had he failed, an entire race of people would have failed. And I have to remind people that he couldn't stay in the same hotel as his teammates. He couldn't eat in the same restaurants as his teammates, but he was expected to walk across those lines and compete at a level equal or exceeding his teammates. And how he did it with such class, grace, and dignity is absolutely amazing. And the pressure that was on him, because if he couldn't handle the abuse, everybody would have said, told you, I told you they couldn't do this. But if he can't play, they said the same thing. I told you they weren't good enough to play in this league. And so failure was not an option on either side of the equation. Can't take the abuse, it's over. If he can't play, it's over. And we don't know, Michael, how long it would have been before another Black man would have gotten the opportunity. Yeah, it could have been another 20 years or more. And so Jackie, who was as fiery and feisty an individual as you will ever meet, as the late great Buck O'Neill would say, Jackie Robinson could duke and would duke. He'd knock you on your rump. But he humbled himself for the greater good because the first guy could not fight back, nor could the first guy fail. Because again, if the first guy fails, there is no second guy. And so the thing that I find the most amazing about the story of Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey is that they came to this historic agreement in a span of 3 hours. You see, Jackie Robinson, guys, had never laid eyes on Branch Rickey until he was summoned away to come to New York to meet with Rickey in his office. And he came expecting that Rickey was putting together his own version of a Negro Leagues and was going to pay the players more money than the existing Negro Leagues were, because Branch Rickey did not want Major League Baseball owners to know what he was up to. He needed to do this very stealthily. And so Robinson literally disappears from the Kansas City Monarchs. His teammates had no idea where he was. And they meet. And that's when Ricky springs it on him. Now, Branch Rickey had to trust that Jackie Robinson would not, that he wouldn't fight back. And you got to understand that Jackie Robinson had been nearly court-martialed from the U.S. Army for refusing to give up his seat to a white officer. So this was totally out of character to take this kind of abuse. And then Jackie had to put his trust in a white man that he just laid eyes on, that he would not be left out there hung to dry. And these two strong-willed individuals came to one accord in a span of 3 hours. And it literally changed the course of American history. Now, after 1947, Ricky turned Robinson aloof. And Robinson became very active in social causes. You can see him right there front and center with Dr. King on many other marches. And he understood the platform that he had. And he put pressure on the other Black players, particularly those with the Dodgers, or with Roy Campanella and Don Newcombe and Junior Gilliam, Joe Black. And so, yeah, he is kind of that place of marking when we talk about platforms. And then later others would come along. Sports has always been used to break barriers in our society. And so for me, I take great pride in the fact that the athletes of today are utilizing their platform to speak out against inequality and social injustice. But when we start to look at the origins of this, it goes as far back as Jack Johnson, Joe Louis, Jesse Owens, but of course, Jackie Robinson is front and center. And Michael, you know, we make the bold assertion that Jackie Robinson's breaking of the color barrier wasn't just a part of the civil rights movement, it actually marked the beginning of the civil rights movement. This is 1947. This is well before those more noted civil rights occurrences. This is before Brown versus the Board of Education. This is before Rosa Parks' refusal to move to the back of the bus. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., guys, was only a sophomore at Morehouse College when Jackie signed that contract to play in the Dodgers organization. President Truman would not integrate the armed forces until a year after Jackie. So for all intensive purposes, this is what started the ball of social progress rolling in our country, baseball. And our country literally jumped on the coattail of baseball.
Another question about another Negro Leagues great who ultimately made the jump to Major League Baseball, Hank Aaron, who we lost last month. I wonder, and this is sort of a two-part question, what Hank meant to you personally as a kid growing up in Georgia, and then secondly, how Hank's passing and the death of other Negro Leagues greats perhaps adds to a sense of urgency in executing your mission.
Yeah. He meant the world to me. As you mentioned, as a kid growing up in Crawfordville, Georgia, 80 miles east of Atlanta, 50 miles west of Augusta, all of 500 people. Henry Aaron was my all-time favorite Major League Baseball player. Henry Aaron was my childhood idol. Anytime that we were on the sandlot, I was going to be Henry Aaron. Yeah, and I'm sure the other kids who probably some of them want to be Henry Aaron too, they're wondering why Bob always got to be Henry Aaron. But Henry Aaron was my guy. And my heart is still a little heavy, Michael, to be honest, you know, with his passing. He leaves a tremendous void for the Negro Leagues family because a lot of people still don't know that his illustrious career began in the Negro Leagues, 1952, with the Indianapolis Clowns. And so I got to tour Mr. Aaron in 1999. And Major League Baseball was celebrating the 25th anniversary of him breaking Henry Aaron's record. And Buck O'Neill was out of town, and the Royals were participating, and they had brought Mr. Aaron to town. And so, guess who gets to tour his childhood idol? You guessed it. And man, I was a nervous wreck. You know, I'm at home, guys. I'm laying out everything. Clothes got to be just right. Your wife's like, what is wrong with you? I said, look, you don't understand. This is Henry Aaron. And so we get here, they mic me up. We've got a throng of media, and it's Mr. Aaron and his wife, Billy, and I'm taking him on a tour of the Negro Leagues Museum. Well, we get to what is my favorite photograph in the entire museum. And Michael, it is of an 18-year-old Henry Aaron standing at the train station in Mobile, Alabama, 1952, about to go leave to join the Indianapolis Clowns. And we stopped at that photograph, and we teased him. We said, because his nickname when he played for the Clowns was Pork Chops. This is well before he became Hammerin' Hank. His nickname was Pork Chops. And we said, Mr. Aaron, why they call you Pork Chops? He said, I guess that was the only thing I knew how to order off the menu. So he found something and stuck with it. And so this picture of him is a beautiful picture of him standing there at the train station. He must weigh 150 pounds soaking wet. And he goes to the Clowns again as a skinny cross-handed hitting shortstop. For those of you who are wondering about cross-handed, Henry Aaron was a right-hand hitter who was hitting with his left hand on top. That is unorthodox. The fear is that you break your wrist hitting in that manner. Now, Henry Aaron is knocking the cover off the baseball in a highly unorthodox fashion. But when he gets to the Clowns, they put the right hand on top, and of course, the rest is history. But if you look at the picture at his feet, it's nothing but a duffel bag. And that's all he had with him. And he told me, he said, Bob, I may have had 2 changes of clothes in that bag, $1.50 in my pocket, and a ham sandwich that my mama had made me, going to go chase that dream. It worked out pretty well for the Hammer. By the end of the 52 season, the Braves had signed him away. And of course, they were at that time the Boston Braves would become the Milwaukee Braves, who then would go on to become the Atlanta Braves. And Henry Aaron will go down in the annals of baseball history as one of his all-time greatest players. Well, after we finished the tour, we go across the street to the Gym Theater, right across the street from the museum. And my good friends, Joe Postansky and Jason Whitlock, lead a conversation, kind of a town hall conversation with Mr. Aaron. The theater is filled to the rafters. And after that, though, we go up to the mezzanine level of the Gym Theater, and I get to sit down and enjoy a platter of Gates barbecue ribs with my childhood idol. Y'all, it doesn't get any better than that. That is by far the greatest day in baseball for me. We can never define Henry Aaron's career or reduce it to just being a baseball player. Henry Aaron will be better known as this humanitarian, this astute businessman, philanthropist, civil rights icon who continually used his life to try to help those who have been marginalized in this country. And baseball gave him a platform that allowed him to do that. And he took advantage of that. And he was as giving an individual as anyone I've ever met. And like I said, in this crazy life that we live, most of us have sports heroes. And it's rare that you get an opportunity to meet your sports hero. And sometimes when we do, they don't always meet the lofty expectations that we have of them. But for this kid from Crawfordville, Georgia, he far exceeded anything that I could have expected. And he's still the favorite person that I've ever toured through this museum. We've had 2 American presidents, and Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, tour this museum, 2 first ladies of these United States with Laura Bush and Mrs. Obama, Michelle Obama, General Colin Powell, which is one of my favorite tours. But with no disrespect to them and the plethora of athletes and entertainers who come here, they are not Henry Aaron in the eyes and minds of this kid from Crawfordville, Georgia.
They say don't meet your heroes, but I would suppose that's a major exception to that adage. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I want to, before we wrap here, shift gears a little bit to some audience questions in the final kind of 10 minutes that we have. One comes from, and pardon my pronunciation if it's incorrect here, but Gary Grau, who is curious about David Malarcher, who was the protege of Richard Foster. And does the museum have any memorabilia from him, and kind of what what has the museum done as far as David is concerned?
No, gentleman Dave Malacha, great ball player, contemporary of Rube Foster. No, I wish we had memorabilia. You know, there are some images of him in the museum, but no significant memorabilia. It would be a treasure trove to find something that belonged to him that we could showcase here at the museum. But another great baseball player and a great baseball mind. And I do think people so undervalue the understanding of the game that the players from the Negro Leagues had. And that's why I think the coaches and managers don't get nearly enough credit, you know, because we fall in love with the romantic nature of these unsung baseball heroes who overcame tremendous social adversity to play the game that they love. But these were astute men and women who understood the nuances of this game. You know, that's what I talk about when I talk about Rube Foster. He was brilliant across all levels, across the entire spectrum of this game. Dave Malacha was the same thing, you know, astute, understood this game, you know, great baseball mind. But no, I wish we had something that belonged to him.
Another question from the chat is about the legacy of Minnie Minoso and the role that Latin players sort of played in the Negro Leagues, and I wonder if you might reflect on sort of what takeaways you have from his career.
Yeah, no, Minnie is one too that I'm so proud to say was one of my dearest friends. Minnie Minoso was just a delight to be around. Minnie Minoso, before he joined and moved in and played in the major leagues, started for the New York Cubans in the Negro Leagues. Like a lot of Spanish speaking athletes who played baseball in this country, they were shunned from the major leagues as well. And once upon a time, white Cubans could play in the major leagues. But if you were of any other ethnicity or dark skin, you couldn't play. And Minnie Minoso started for the New York Cubans. But Minnie was a mainstay here at the museum. Minnie had this very effervescent kind of personality. When he walked in the room lit up. And you just wanted to be around him. And you couldn't be sad around Minnie. And I had great disappointment when Minnie Minoso in 2006, Minnie Minoso and Buck O'Neill were the only two living names on this ballot of those who were being considered for the National Baseball Hall of Fame, and neither of them got in. Minnie Minoso is the Latino Jackie Robinson. There is no question that Minnie Minoso should be in the Negro League. Minnie Minoso was a great ball player. The Go-Go White Sox didn't become the Go-Go White Sox until Minnie Minoso got there. Minnie was the one that put the go in Go-Go White Sox. And it saddens me that he's not in the Hall of Fame. I hope that he will also be on the Golden Era Committee ballot later this year. We believe that Buck O'Neill will be on that ballot as well, Michael. And I hope that Minnie Minoso is on that ballot, and perhaps that he will finally get his long overdue recognition and be enshrined in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. I was at Ernie Banks' funeral in 2015, and we were all saddened by the passing of Ernie Banks, and Minnie Minoso was there at the service. And I don't know, less than 2 months later, Minnie Minoso was gone. And so the city of Chicago lost its two most iconic baseball players in a span of about 2 months. Ernie Banks on the north side, Minnie Minoso on the south side. And so, yeah, now Minnie was just one of many great Spanish speaking athletes who called the Negro Leagues home.
Want to probably wrap up here with the remaining few minutes we have with an individual who you've alluded to several times throughout, but I want to give as much time as I can to honor his legacy, and that is Buck O'Neill, who I know was a key figure in your life and in the museum. You can't go anywhere in Kansas City and talk baseball and talk just civic pride without his name popping up. And I think he's as beloved of a figure as you will find in the city. What was it about Buck that drew people to him as much as it did?
You know, Michael, he had an innateness about him. You know, we're talking about the same kinds of quality that a Mother Teresa or Dr. King or Gandhi, that kind of level of innateness which allows you to love in spite of. And to be quite frank, most of us fell in love with Buck and we never saw him play. But we fell in love with the man who told us about the heroes of the Negro Leagues. And we fell in love with the Buck O'Neill who showed us so vividly and beautifully that you could indeed get further in this life with love than with hate. And that is what endeared us to him. And I got to spend a considerable amount of time with this man. And you knew that you were in the presence of somebody pretty special. And it wasn't a standoffish kind of thing. It was a very engaging, inviting kind, and he welcomed you. Now there may have been some people who love life as much as Buck, but no one loved life and people more than Buck. And I got to witness this everywhere that we go, guys. We'd be in the airport. And if he didn't know you, he'd walk up to you, introduce himself to you. My name is Buck O'Neill. What's yours? And next thing you know, you're engaged in a conversation. And as we would be leaving to go to our respective gates, people are sharing an embrace as if they've known each other all their lives. And the man just absolutely never met a stranger in his life. And that is what really I think drew people. And he walked. People always ask me, "What do you remember most about Buck?" And again, the great joy that I had traveling the country. And I tell people all the time, the smartest thing I ever did was I kept my mouth closed and I listened. There was a lot of wisdom to be imparted if you wanted it. He didn't force it on you, but it was there if you wanted it. And I tried to soak up as much of it as I possibly could. But the thing that I remember most about Buck is this: you always felt better leaving Buck than you did before you came to see him. And there's not many that strikes you in that way. He come into the museum. Now here I am. Now the building's only 2 stories, and I'm getting ready to get on the elevator. And Buck, who at that time was in his 90s, he's running up the stairs. And now I can't get on the elevator. I got to go up the stairs with him. And he was fun loving. He was engaging and filled with everything that's good. The goodness that was in this man just overflowed. And I asked him, I said, "Well, where did that come from?" And you know what he told me? He said, "My daddy told me when I was a boy, treat every man the way you want to be treated. The golden rule." Now, we all know the golden rule, but we don't all live the golden rule. And Buck O'Neill took something that his father said when most of us wouldn't even be paying any attention. And he let that kind of propel him throughout his life, and he never forgot that, and he continued to live that. And I think as a result, so many people were endeared to this very gentle man.
Absolutely. For folks who want to learn more and kind of hear the stories of the museum, short of coming there, which I would obviously recommend, where online can folks find you and the museum?
Yeah, absolutely. We're on the World Wide Web at NLBM.com. And if you're on social media, NLB Museum KC on Twitter and Instagram. And if you're so inclined, you can follow me at NLBM Prez, Prez, on both Instagram and Twitter. And we're constantly trying to keep people abreast of things that are going on. As a matter of fact, this Saturday, wonderful program called Reading Around the Bases with the author of a wonderful book on the life of Buck O'Neill. And I know the green screen makes it a little hard to see it, but the book is called The Greatest Thing, and it's written by Christy Nerthemeyer, and she'll be doing is a beautiful children's book and beautifully illustrated. And Christy will be reading the book as part of a family reading program with a live stream program that we're doing at 11 a.m. on Saturday morning. So you can check that out, get the book. It is I tell people all the time, Mike, I wish every child would have the opportunity to meet Buck O'Neill. And Buck passed away almost 15 years ago. But this children's book is a wonderful, wonderful way for people to meet and be touched by the spirit of Buck O'Neill.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not wearing a hat at the moment, but if I did, I would tip it to you, Bob. This has been fantastic, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Want to thank everyone else as well for tuning in. If you're interested in a recorded version of this conversation, it will be available soon at MissouriBusinessAlert.com. But that's it for now. Thank you everyone so much and have a good day.
Bye, everybody. Thank you all so much.